Hello and welcome to Vintage Horror Movies, where we provide commentary, analysis, and criticism of older horror movies. This episode, I wanted to talk about The Cat and the Canary. The Cat and the Canary has been filmed 6 times. It's a comedy horror and one of the earliest old dark house genre films. Those were popular in the 1930s through 1950s. I'll briefly go over the 6 versions. Note, I did not include any version that was just a recording of the play, and there are lots of those. So first, we have The Cat and the Canary from 1927. This is a silent movie, directed by Paul Linney, screenplay and story by Alred A. Cohen, based on the play from 1922 by John Willard. The film was produced by Paul Kohner. This film is one of several films that were comedy horrors inspired by 1920 Broadway plays. The Bat, which I reviewed last week, is another example. And The Bat came out 1 year before this movie. Then there are 2 versions from 1930s. These are early sound versions. The Cat Creeps, directed by Rupert Julian, starring Helen Twelvetrees as Annabelle, Raymond Hackett, Neil Hamilton, Lillian Tashman, Jean Hersholt, Elizabeth Patterson, and Montague Love. Note, this film has been lost. All that remains of it are a few soundtracks and a few clips that were used in the 1930 comedy film Boo. Also, made in 1930, the same team at Universal filmed the Spanish language version of this movie, and instead of being called The Cat and the Canary, it was called The Dead Man's Will. So they made the English version during the day, and then they made the Spanish version at night. But unfortunately, this film has also been lost to time. This is not unusual for early silent movies, given how they deteriorate, but it's just sad that we will never get to see these. Next up, we have the 1939 version from Paramount, directed by Elliot Nugent, starring Bob Hope, Paulette Goddard, and Gail Sondergaard. Then there's a 1961 Swedish television version. I will not attempt to say the name of the Swedish version, but it was directed by Jean Molander. The film stars Lena Granhagen as Annabelle West, Lars Lind as Paul Jones, and Birger Malmsteen as Charlie Wilder. And lastly, the 1978 version. This was a joint U.S.-British version. It's made in color and directed by Radley Metzger. This focuses more on horror than comedy. Starring Honor Blackman, you'll remember her from the James Bond movies as Susan Silsby, Michael Callan as Paul Jones, Edward Fox as Hendrix, Wendy Hiller as Alison Crosby, the lawyer, and notice they changed the gender of the lawyer from the first movies to this one, to female. Olivia Hussey as Cicely Young. You may remember her from a number of movies, including The First Black Christmas. Wilfred Hyde White as Cyrus West. More on him a little later. Beatrice Lehman as Mrs. Pleasant. Carol Lindley as Annabelle. Daniel Massey as Dr. Harry Blythe. And lastly, Peter McHenry as Charlie Wilder. Where to find these movies? The first one, the silent film, is on Internet Archive. The other 2 versions, as already mentioned from 1930, are sadly lost. The 1939 Paramount version is on Internet Archive or Tubi. I also could not find the 1961 Swedish television version. And lastly, the 1978 British version is also on Internet Archive and Tubi, and probably Amazon has it. I just didn't check there. Rotten Tomatoes scores. The first movie from 1927, critics gave it a 93, audiences gave it a 75, so not bad for a movie that's 100 years old. The 1930 version, that's called The Cat Creeps, the one that's been lost to time, critics before it was lost reviewed it and gave it a 78%, audiences did not review it. The Spanish language version was not rated. The Bob Hope version, critics did not rate it, but audiences gave it a 71, so they liked that one pretty good. Swedish version is not rated, and the British color version, critics did not rate it, audiences gave it 29%, so it doesn't look like audiences like that movie. Okay, on to the plot. Probably obvious, but there are major spoilers here, so if you have not seen these movies and you plan to, turn back now. You can't really talk about a lot of the plot here without giving a lot of it away. So, the 1927 version, the opening shot of a gloved hand pushing aside a thick layer of dust and cobwebs covering the film's title. That was a fun touch. Then we see a small person being harassed among what I think are medicine bottles by some really big cats. Let me show you that. So that's a pretty cool visual, especially for a movie this old. Now, the plot revolves around the death of Cyrus West, who I think is this person here. He leaves a will which can only be opened 20 years after his death. And no, I'm not sure why it's 20 years. His ghost is said to be haunting his old dark mansion, which overlooks the Hudson River. His relatives arrive for the reading of the will, which will be at midnight. The house is guarded by his trusty maid, Mammy Pleasant. Let me show you another picture of her. So here she is to greet the guest. You can tell from this look we are not sure if what she's really up to. So don't count her out. Oh, and insanity runs in the family. So the list of the relatives are there are typically 3 men, 3 women, plus a few other supporting characters. So the nephews, Harry Blythe, Charlie Wilder, Paul Jones, and then the nieces, well, she's not a niece, but the aunt, Susan Silsby, and then nieces Cicely Young and Annabelle West. So here's a picture of the 1927 cast. A lot of moving parts to keep track of. Mr. Crosby, the lawyer, reads the will. Annabelle is revealed as the heir. Cyrus considered his family a bunch of leechers that just want his money, and so he leaves the house and all the money to his most distant relative. There are several rules, though. Number 1, everyone has to spend the night in the old house. And number 2, Annabelle has to be declared sane by a doctor before the morning. If she's insane, the entire fortune goes to a person who is listed mysteriously in a second sealed envelope. And no one knows who that is. The plot thickens as they're informed that a lunatic known as the Cat has escaped from the local mental asylum and may be hiding in the house. And there's a quote in the movie that says he's a maniac who thinks he's a cat and tears his victims like they are canaries. The family fortune also includes a diamond necklace that is also hidden in the house. And there are lots of secret passageways. The 1939 version has a change in location to the bayous of Louisiana, and everyone has to be brought in individually via a canoe. It's 10 years after Cyrus's death. Here his last name is Norman instead of West, and why they read his will 10 years instead of 20 years later, I'm not sure. The housekeeper here is Mrs. Lou, played by Gail Sondergaard. She says the spirits of the house speak to her. The names of the nieces and nephews have also changed. They are Joyce Norman instead of Annabelle. She's played by Paulette Goddard. Fred Blythe, Charlie Wilder, played by Douglas Montgomery. Cicely Young, Aunt Susan Tilbury, and Wally Campbell, played by Bob Hope. Note the character of Wally was added for Bob Hope. This took over, I assume, the Paul role from the previous movie. Wally also appears in this movie much more than Paul did in the previous movie, and Wally is also making wisecracks all the time. Unfortunately, not all of them land, in my humble opinion. You'd have to check out the movie and let me know. But let me see if I can find a promo shot of that cast. So notice the cat behind them, so that's a fun shot. And then lastly, the 1978 version does not have the creepy, dark, isolated atmosphere of the preceding movies. It's set in 1934. The names have been changed back to the original names, and the characters are more developed here. This is more considered a horror film than a comedy. So let me show you one of the promo films for this. Notice this is interesting because it shows all the different people that are in the house. So I think we have 6 cousins. I may have already said this, and then the supporting characters. There are also more deaths in this version, and there's an intro scene that won't make any sense until you see the end of the movie. One of the biggest differences here is Cyrus has recorded videos for the group and seems to answer their questions long after he's been dead. So let me show you Cyrus. There's also a really fun scene where Mrs. Pleasant is pouring drinks for everyone. Um, so she pours a drink for Cyrus. Then she walks behind the screen where the video is being shown to everyone, and then continues to pour drinks for everyone else. So that was definitely a fun addition. Also, this version has closing credit cards that are held up by Cyrus. So here he's holding up a card, I think, that says he's of sound mind and body or whatever, but he also does the credits at the end. So that's a lot of fun. After he's done doing closing credits, he also gets up and steps outside the screen. It seems that Wilfred Hyde White had a great time playing Cyrus, and apparently he did all his scenes in one day. Should you watch these movies? Well, to be honest, I'm not sure they're classics, but the first movie has lots of unique features and is one of the predecessors of the old dark house genre. So I definitely think the 1927 version is worth a look. Also, if you're a Bob Hope fan, check out the 1939 version. And I personally like the 1978 version, although I know a lot of people didn't. If you watch these movies, just don't expect the plot to be very intricate, because it's not. On to trivia. So I have a few items here. The play on which these films are based ran for 148 performances. The 1927 movie is said to have influenced James Wells' The Old Dark House from 1932. There are a number of different versions of the 1927 silent version on the Internet Archive with different scores. There's also a MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, restored version with commentary that is definitely worth a watch. I tried to upload it onto YouTube, but it violated copyright, so I couldn't upload it. I think it's because Eureka released a new box set of it. So go to Internet Archive if you want to see a version of that. The sets for the 1927 version are based on German Expressionism, which leads to some very interesting visuals. And probably the most famous example of Expressionism in early films was The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1920. So I'm going to review that a little later. Laura LaPlante, or I don't think it's LaPlante. Laura LaPlante was Universal's biggest star at the time of the 1927 movie. Unfortunately, her career didn't continue much after the talkies, which was common for many silent actors. We have a quote from the 1927 version which says, "My relatives have watched my wealth as if they were cats and I was a canary." In the 1927 version, the housekeeper is referred to as Mammy Pleasant, which is problematic. She was played by African American actors in some earlier plays or by white actors in blackface, which is obviously very problematic. So in the 1939 version, she's changed to Miss Lou, and in the 1978 version, she's changed to Mrs. Pleasant. Horror tropes. Number one, the hand that comes from behind a secret location and kills a person. So I have 2, I think, photos of that. Here's one. So that's from the 1927 version. And obviously that hand is scary. And this is from a shadow of the hand from the 1939 version. So that's a common trope now, but back then I'm not sure it was. Also, 2, hidden panels and secret passages behind bookcases. 3, paintings where the eyes move. And 4, of course, a bunch of people trapped in an old dark mansion together. The movie Dracula, Universal's Dracula, came out in 1931, so the horror genre I don't think existed as a standalone genre before then. 1927 movie has a lot of creative and cutting-edge technologies used by Paul Linney, including crane shots, tracking shots, shadows, shots down long hallways, etc. How the cat looks. In the 1927 version, he has bulgy eyes and tusks for some reason. I think I have a picture of that. Yep, so there he is. Not sure how that's supposed to be a cat, but there you go. I thought in later versions they would try to do different variations of cat like they did with the bat, but unfortunately they just wore a mask. So I was kind of let down by that because that was not very creative. Um, so check out the bat if you want to see a couple of different versions of how they handle remakes, but nothing much else here to see. Linney's only surviving German film as a director was Waxworks from 1924, a 3-part anthology for which he also served as production designer. This brought him to the attention of Universal Studios, so he was asked to travel to the United States. In the 1927, Aunt Susan is played by Flora Finch, who also appeared with James Bunny in an uncredited role in this movie as a milk truck driver. They both appeared in dozens of Vitagraph comedies together. Linney's other famous movie is The Man Who Laughs from 1928. It also involves an element of German Expressionism and was produced by Universal. Sadly, Paul Linney died 2 years after making The Cat and the Canary at the age of 44 from what is referred to as blood poisoning. That seemed to be a catch-all phrase back then for any type of infection. That's a shame because I'm sure we would have seen many more great horror movies from him. Radley Metzger, in the 1978 version, previously made a number of European erotica films. They are noted for their lavish design, witty screenplays, and a penchant for unusual camera angles. The 1939 version, Elizabeth Patterson plays the role of Aunt Susan in both that version and the lost version from The Cat Creeps from 1930. And also in 1939, the teaming of Bob Hope and Paulette Garter was so popular that they quickly made another movie which was released, I think, 7 months later, called The Ghost Breakers. It had many of the same plot points. And the 1978 version has a number of set pieces that were also used in the movie The Omen from 1976. This is not unusual. Many of the studios built like staircases and things that were reused over and over again in any movies they were working on. And lastly, it seems strange to me that a number of these cousins are also on the verge, or seem to be on the verge of hooking up. I think it's explained by the fact that they were distant cousins, or I read in one version they hinted that the person was adopted. It may be the Bob Hope character. Anyway, that seemed to be a strange choice to me. But I guess they had to be related in order to get them all there. Anyway, that's all I have for this week. If you watch any or all of these movies, please let me know what you think in the comments. I would be interested to hear what you think. And until next week, watch out for the cat or the bat. We'll talk to you later. Bye.